oceans, which are normally about pH 8, and as they acidify, it's a problem for mollusks in particular that have calcium carbonate bodies which are going to dissolve in this. Okay, I spent a lot of my time actually looking at acid soils and the problem that arose in the drought in the southern lakes, where the pH went down to sort of 3, 4, sometimes in a region where it was like battery acid. But I was co-opted onto this project to investigate a rather different phenomenon, and that was the high pH which you often see in the southeast in the wetlands. And we know this from the telemetered data in a lot of these wetlands, that seasonally the pH can actually get up around about pH 10, which seems rather extreme for biological organisms. And the problem, well, it was a concern that this was going to affect the biology, the biodiversity, everything that's actually living within these wetlands. The actual cause of it was unclear, but it was known it's been happening for quite some time. So with Justin, we started a survey project in 2012. And what we did is we spent a lot of time driving around to different wetlands, and we sampled the sediment, we sampled the surface water, and we also sampled the groundwater. Did a whole lot of geochemical analyses, and really we didn't come up with anything very concrete. So we made some tentative predictions about what might be causing this high pH. And one of those was sulfate-producing bacteria. And I'll describe the chemistry briefly in a moment. The other was that it might actually be to do with the plants that are growing there. They're making it go alkaline. And there's a possible scenario for how that could happen as well. And the geochemists kind of like the idea that it's all just the chemistry, nothing to do with the biology, and that it was something to do with the change in the composition of the water as it evaporated. Because as we go through the season, the depth changes considerably. So the second project that I undertook, I led, and I went from a different direction because I'm not a geochemist, I'm a biologist, a plant physiologist. And I co-opted onto this a real geochemist, Luke Mosley, and together we concentrated on, four wetlands in particular. Tarratap, which is our main study site. We were going to do Rocky, but Rocky sort of dried out early in 2014, and so we took some sediment samples and some water, but couldn't do a lot. We did Schofield Swamp and Little Reedy Swamp. Okay, so there's Rocky in 2014. It was wet, it had vegetation in it, but dried out soon afterwards. So let's just have a look at what happens in a typical year. And this is Tarratap in 2014. So early in the year, it's dry. The water level is low. As we get the winter rains, it begins to fill. And so if we go into this A phase, what's actually happening is that we've got filling, and at the same time as we've got filling, what we see is there is an increase in pH. And then in spring, where it stabilises, and then it begins to dry out. And at the same time, we're continuing to get an increase in pH. And then as the season goes on and the water level declines, the pH reaches maximum and then starts to go down, and then of course it collapses again when it dries out. So what we have to have a look at is what's actually happening in each of these phases. And one thing that is happening, do we have a shoe? No, we've got hands. Okay, we've got hands. The other thing that's happening is that we're getting plant growth. We start out with sort of terrestrial vegetation, and as it gets flooded, it gets converted into aquatic vegetation. So during this A phase, there's an increase in temperature, an increase in daylight, and there's an increase in light intensity, all of which are conducive to plant growth. In the B phase, as it starts to dry out, the salinity is increasing, so that's changing. And then in the C phase, which is this one here, which is starting to correspond to, oh, great, which is starting to correspond to the highest pH, then we've got all of these things converging. Lots of light, lots of temperature, and probably lots of nutrients because it's being concentrated. And then, as it dries out, the aquatic plants give way to terrestrial plants. But when we first went to these wetlands, the thing that struck me was how dense the vegetation was. These are highly productive wetlands. Lots of plants, especially aquatic plants. And so this is here at Taratat, okay, you can't see, but it's a sort of depth of about 30 centimetres, and it's just absolutely covered, completely dense with vegetation. Now, of course, this is vegetation which is photosynthesising. Now, at the end of the season, of course, it changes. And you've got all of this vegetation which is going to rot down throughout the season or towards the end of the season. And of course, that rotting down has biological processes associated with it which potentially impact the pH. So Luke and I set out to investigate 3 possible drivers. And the first of those is the one that we suspected from the previous study, which was about sulfate reduction. And what sulfate reduction does is it takes sulfuric acid or sulfate, and it uses carbohydrate from the breakdown of plants. If you've got those 2 things, sulfate and the source of carbohydrate, then you can generate sulfides, which are characteristics of alkaline and bicarbonate. The other possibility is that it's photosynthesis. And what photosynthesis does is it fixes carbon dioxide. So it takes carbon dioxide out of the water column and converts it into carbohydrate. In aquatic systems, the source of that carbon dioxide is bicarbonate. And so if you take the carbon dioxide out, fix it with photosynthesis, what you're left with is hydroxyl ions. And the pH will naturally go up. And that's easy to demonstrate. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the vapor concentration, but it's actually discussed in a bit more detail in a publication that we developed from it. Okay, now this looks complicated, doesn't it? But let me just simplify. What we did is we took sediment and surface water from the various wetlands, and we incubated this with time under constant conditions. Now, let me just explain this phlebotomy, because this is what should happen if it's to do with self-reducing bacteria. And this was soil that's collected from the lower lakes, which is very high in sulfides or sulfuric acid. And if you feed it with mulch, and what we did is we chopped up Phragmites mulch and put it into it, you can see that the sulfate is converted into sulfides. At the same time, the pH down here goes up. Now, it's not a really, really high pH, but it does go up. We did exactly the same thing for both surface water and sediment from the various wetlands. And what we found is that, yes, okay, if you add organic matter, rotting vegetation, then the sulfate concentration goes down. But what we didn't find was any increase in pH. In fact, what happened, it was more likely to acidify. So if self-reducing bacteria were the main cause, we would expect quite large changes in sulfate. There weren't large changes in sulfate, but small changes in sulfate, and we'd expect the pH to rise. So I think essentially we could rule out the dominant hypothesis from the previous study that was the cause. So now let's look at an alternative, and that is that the pH is increased by photosynthesis. And to do this, we set up what we call mesocosms, which is a fancy name for a glass jar with some plants and soil in it, and kept those under controlled conditions in great chambers for a number of months. Okay, so if you take some soil from one of these wetlands and you incubate it, what happens is that stuff grows. And what grows, anything could come out of the soil. So we have a variety of mesocosms with different, what we call biofilms. So dark, nothing happens. In the light, lots happens. So then we began to measure the pH in these mesocosms. And just look at the bottom one to start with, because this bottom one is for a mesocosm which is kept in the dark. However, if you put it in the light, or light and dark in this case here, so the dashed line is light on, light off, what you see is, there is a much higher pH, but superimposed upon this is a diurnal variation in pH. It goes down during the night and it rises during the day. So this suggested that strongly that it's got to be something to do with the plants that are there. Because there's no plants, the pH is not high. So if we have a look at over an extended period, here we start from the light, and it takes about 24 hours before it actually bottoms out. And pH here of about pH 8 is fairly neutral, and then we turn the light on, and within 4 to 5 hours, pH increases. But just remember how long it's actually taken to get back down to this low level. So what this here is just a bunch of mesocosms from all different areas in the wetlands that we studied, and in all of them, the same thing is happening. But in the dark, the pH is low, in the light, it rises.
Can I just make a comment though? pH 8 to pH 10 is 100-fold difference.
Correct.
I mean, that's in 24, or in what, a couple of hours. I mean, that's pretty dramatic.
That's correct. It is a big change. Yep.
Yeah.
What, unreasonably?
Well, no, it's a monstrous change. I mean, people don't actually see that when you actually look at a graph. And that's pH is a log scale.
Yes.
7.5 to 11 is unbelievable.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's have a look at. So it looks as though it's to do with photosynthesis, but why does the pH stay high? And one of the arguments would be that these are shallow wetlands. Carbon dioxide can diffuse into it, and it should come to the same concentration night. Every night it should come down to this base level. So in the daytime we've got net fixation of carbon dioxide plants, all right? pH goes up. In the night, what should happen is that carbon dioxide should redissolve from the atmosphere and replenish the bicarbonate which is in the system. If that was the case, then the pH should be dropping back down to around about pH 8, but that doesn't happen. So a prediction was that the problem was that carbon dioxide was not re-equilibrating, that its diffusion back into the water column was too slow to make up for the amount of carbon dioxide which has been removed by the plants during the light. Now you can see here, it goes up, it's starting to come down. Now it doesn't reach the bottom because it takes about 24 hours for it to bottom out. Because we're turning the light back on again so quickly, it hasn't had a chance. What this experiment here did was to have two different mesocosms, one which was open to the atmosphere, allow carbon dioxide in, and the other which was sealed from the atmosphere by placing a petri dish on top of the water. When you do that, what you see is that the pH actually stays high. You get much damped oscillations in the day-night pH. And this strongly suggests is that one of the problems in getting a neutral pH is the fact that the carbon dioxide diffusion is the limitation. You've also got such a dense mass of photosynthesizing algae and plants generally that it's going to suck out the CO2 very, very quickly. And you can see that pH went up by 2 units within 4 or 5 hours because of this density of plant material. Okay. Now the other thing that's happening, as the plants are growing, of course they're taking nutrients out of the water column. That huge biomass of plants has got to be made up of something. And plants need a lot of mineral nutrients, and particularly calcium and magnesium. So let's have a look at the mesocosm in the light. pH of 10.6, in the dark, pH 8.4. If you do an analysis of these plants, what it shows is that, especially for calcium and magnesium, there is a massive reduction in the concentration of these two key elements within the water column. And of course, calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate are important to the geochemistry of that system. If you measure the amount in the plants, you see that there's a huge reservoir of calcium and magnesium which has been fixed into these plants. So in addition to taking carbon dioxide out of the water and causing the pH to rise, we have reductions in calcium and magnesium, which of course are going to affect the geochemistry of the water system. So our conclusions from this is that we couldn't find any evidence for sulfur-reducing bacteria. We can eliminate that. There is strong evidence, and I think the strongest evidence, that the carbon dioxide depletion by the aquatic plants is the primary cause, and the reason why the pH stays high is because it can't re-equilibrate. There may be geochemical changes due to the uptake of mineral cations, and the modelling of this, which I'm not going to show you because I'm not a geochemist and I find it hard to defend, is likely to be involved in this. Evapotranspiration concentration is a more difficult thing to investigate because there are so many things which are happening at the same time. And when you throw in a high plant biomass into this, then the modelling becomes extremely complicated. Okay, so what does all this mean? Are these wetlands unhealthy? Well, clearly they're not in terms of plant growth. The plants obviously are happy if they grow really, really quickly. What about the other critters and things that are floating around? Well, we don't know. But one thing to remember is that in these systems, the main buffering is to do with the carbonate bicarbonate system. And of course, if we're sucking out all the carbonate into the CO2, then it's very, very lightly buffered. It takes very little to shift the pH by quite a lot. And organisms, plants especially, can change the environment around them by pumping acids out, creating local regions directly adjacent to their cells and their tissues that it's a lot different to the pH that is in the bulk solution. And I'm not a zoologist, but I'm thinking that little organisms that are floating around there can probably do the same. So they're probably not seeing these extreme pHs. They're probably seeing something which is somewhat more neutral. Is this caused by the drains? Well, I'm not going to defend that either.
Yes.
It might have changed the geochemistry, but it's hard to believe that these plants weren't there a long time ago doing exactly the same thing. Okay? They're plants. This is what they do for a living. And if we're simply talking about removal of CO2, then how's the drainage going to affect that? Okay, maybe the calcium and magnesium carbonates have been altered. But what I'm saying is that it's not unhealthy. I don't think it's unhealthy. So Luke and I have published this in an article in Transportable Environment, which is available to read, and it includes a bit more about the geochemical modelling. And just to finish, I'd also like to give thanks to Mark Jong and John Bennett from the USA, PWCPB, or something like that anyway. And the Southeast landholders for giving us access to their properties, particularly Pip and Jack Grassenberg.